Hello, good morning, everyone. For those who are in Asia, good evening for those of us who are in the United States. Welcome. And my name is Kelvin, and I'm from PPRO. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Asia Pacific, talking about obviously the impact of COVID, some the trends that we're seeing in terms of this rapid growth. And of course, we'd like to finish off with some tips, perhaps, on what you could do if you're thinking about Asia Pacific. So very quickly, PPRO, we're a digital payment infrastructure that provides all the popular local payment methods in the world's top e-commerce markets. In addition to having a platform, we manage funds flows and provide all the relevant services required to power local payment methods on a global scale. So today we've got about 160 PSPs that we're connected to, and we're also on the back end connected to about 150 plus local payment methods across the world. So my role in PPRO is I head up the team that helps to connect the local payment methods to our platform. I run the payment networks team in PPRO. So enough about me. Today, I'd like to introduce you to two of our panelists. I'll start with the ladies first. So I would like to introduce Alison Yap. She's the Chief International Partnerships at DOKU in Indonesia. She joined DOKU in 2013 and an active board member of the Indonesian Fintech Association. I think executive head of partnerships. So maybe Alison, you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kelvin. Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone from Jakarta, Indonesia here, and good evening to our audience in the US. So my name is Alison. I'm based in Jakarta. I represent DOKU. I'm the Chief International Partnerships. So I look after all of our relationships with our merchants, with our payment gateway partners, technology partners, and the like. So DOKU was founded all the way back 14 years ago in 2006. We were actually at the time the very first local payments company in Indonesia. Since then, the service that we offer has obviously grown a lot. I think the market has changed significantly. A lot of new innovations. Banks have also, gotten on board with online payments that have really changed the landscape. So what we do is our primary business is actually in payment gateway, which is why we have also partnered with PPRO. But other than that, we also offer services like cross-border remittance, local payouts, bill payments, e-money, e-wallet as well. So we do try to offer, a comprehensive payment solution for our clients. Indonesia, in short, is a very complex and very interesting market to be operating in. I joined DOKU back in 2013, and even in just the 7 years that I've been here, I've seen incredible changes in how people make payments, incredible changes in how our regulators view the industry. So it's never boring. There's always something new, and things move at a very fast pace. It is also a very fragmented market with 217 million strong population scattered in a very diverse geographic landscape. Traditionally a very much a cash-based economy, but the government is strongly pushing for the country to go cashless, to be more banked. So definitely a lot of interesting developments that we can talk more about later.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alison. And then my next guest is Rajiv Chandna, Chief Commercial Officer of OVO, Indonesia's largest fintech ecosystem. He leads the OVO Financial Services business lines to deliver innovative products that enable social and financial mobility, something that I'm particularly passionate about. So welcome, Rajiv. Maybe a brief introduction of yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you, Kelvin. And nice to meet you too, Alison. And good morning to everybody here in Asia, and good evening to those, or very late evening to those in the US. Like Kelvin mentioned, I'm Rajiv. I'm originally from India, grew up in London for the most part. My better half, my wife, comes from China. A lot of our family lives in Thailand, and we currently live and work in Singapore and Indonesia. So we find ourselves very, very lucky to have a viewpoint, or at least we get bombarded by all the fintech innovations that are happening across these markets. And it's, it's overwhelming, the change that Asia Pacific is going through. And, and particularly in the COVID times, where it feels like 5 years of digital adoption has been compressed into a time period of 9 months. So a little bit about OVO. OVO is Indonesia's largest mobile wallet. We've got millions of users that transact with us daily across a number of different use cases, in particular for transacting on e-commerce websites such as Tokopedia, but also for food delivery with providers such as GrabFood, which is the largest food delivery player in Southeast Asia. My focus is to build financial services products, which is to bring access to millions of users in Indonesia who don't have access to simple products to protect their family via insurance, or plan for their future via simple, easy to understand, transparent investment products. And in a country of 300 million, less than 2 million people today actively invest in any way, shape, or form in Indonesia. So for us, that's really the purpose behind why OVO exists. It's a young company, only 3 years old, but we feel proud for how far we've come, and really, really excited to share our journey, but also how we look at Asia Pacific as part of this session. So thank you very much for inviting me along.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. And I'm glad that we have also recently started a partnership with both OVO and DOKU, and we're really happy to have you here on this panel as well. Now, maybe just to set the stage for the folks across the world, right? Like a brief introduction to APAC. I think arguably it's one of the most vibrant digital payments and e-commerce landscape, which is a strategic focus for many businesses trying to looking to expand. And digital payments, in which all of us are in, basically powers the growth of e-commerce in APAC. Just to share a few interesting numbers is that, like for example, in Southeast Asia, digital payments, based on what we understand, is set to grow from about a $600 billion business to about 1 trillion business by 2025. And you talk about fragmented landscape, Alison, earlier, and we see that probably there are 70 different popular local payment methods across the entire APAC, and there's quite a few in Indonesia as well, and in many of these countries that we operate in. So that's sort of like setting the stage, and we talked also a bit earlier before we started that Indonesia has got one of the world's highest mobile penetration rate in the world, and a lot of Asia, a lot of APAC is really going mobile first, So I think in that sense, we kind of should be ready when something like COVID comes along. I think to me, that's the biggest disruption in my lifetime, at least. We talk about disruptive economies and technologies, but this is one big disruption where everybody works from home across the world pretty much. So what I'd like to start with is maybe to hear your views on how you think COVID has really changed that whole consumer behavior, drove that adoption of e-commerce and digital payments, especially in the light of social distancing. People are staying at home. Alison, you mentioned earlier, maybe you haven't left home in 6 months, but it'll be interesting to kind of hear your views both in Indonesia and maybe how you see it across the region in APAC. So maybe Alison, would you like to go first?
Sure. So yeah, I think DOKU, obviously we work directly with the merchants, right? So we've seen merchants across different types and different sizes really, when COVID started, scrambled to make changes in how they were selling and receiving payments from their clients, from their customers, right? So we had, the big enterprises that were, very focused on offline retail. They had some website as well, but they didn't really necessarily focus so much on their website sales because the retail offline sales were so strong. But suddenly when COVID happened, they realized that they really had no choice but to go online, right, obviously. So a lot of them were actually using WhatsApp and other social media chatting to communicate one-on-one with their customers, and basically sending catalogs over WhatsApp saying, hey, these are our new products that we have in store. Which one would you like to buy? So it was really, it was quite fascinating to see big retail brands doing this on such a one-on-one basis with their customers, right? So they would be sending catalogs, and the customer would just simply, type in their orders onto the chat application. And then what happens with the payments, right? So a lot of them were now looking for e-invoice payment solutions. So the cashier would make an invoice with a payment link and then send it to the customer so that the customer can be directed to a payment page where they can choose to pay using credit card or OVO or whatever other online digital payments that they have. So that was really interesting to me that, you had the likes of, people who have thousands of retail stores in Indonesia now having to really change completely how they sell to their customers through WhatsApp, basically. So we saw that was quite interesting in the retail sector. Another sector that was really interesting was actually in logistics. So we have a few cargo logistics clients who are DOKU's clients who are using our service for B2B payments. So in the past, a lot of their clients would actually physically go to a bank teller to make these kind of payments in cash. Right. So obviously now they couldn't do that anymore. So these logistics players had a lot of work to do to educate their end clients about, hey, you have to go online now. You can't go to the teller anymore. This is how you go to our website. This is how you go to our portal, generate an invoice, really taking them step by step on how to do that. So those are just examples of what I saw, right away when COVID basically exploded back in March. That was, I thought, quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. I think, I hear you about, that whole move from retail to, offline to online. And one of those interesting facts that I've come across is that, China started this year with about 30% retail in e-commerce. But what we see is that it's projected to be more than 50% of their retail will go to e-commerce by 2021. And so, Rajiv, what about your experience? Like, what has it been so far, in Asia, I suppose, because, you obviously have family across the different countries within APAC.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let me break down the answer into a few parts. I think the first is consumer. I mean, I think consumer adoption of digital business models has, grown through the roof. Like my mom, she lives in Delhi, and she's never used any e-commerce platform in her entire life. And she's been calling me. She's now set up her Paytm account. She has a WhatsApp relationship with the store down the road that deliver milk to her every day. All of the settlements done via WhatsApp. I mean, it's just to see her. Like, she calls me every day. Hey, I'm having this issue with Paytm. Hey, they're selling gold. Should I buy gold from them or should I go? So, like, there is this, this is my mom. She's 70. And, for the first time in her life, she's using WhatsApp for e-commerce, which up until now for her was just a forwarding engine. At least to me, it felt like. And then I guess there is there's the merchant perspective, which is kind of what Alison was talking about, like the explosion of one man, one woman, micro SMEs is just incredible. Like, ability to provide lunch for your kid because your kid's, not going to school anymore and you don't know what to cook for him or her every day. And there'll be like a little auntie down the road who again has a WhatsApp service as a micro SME, and she creates, 100 tiffin boxes a day and just sort of runs around and, delivers around in a 1 kilometer radius. Like, these business models, whether that's food delivery or creative game or school care, like they've just exploded. The third perspective is in terms of buying behavior. Like, I know like all of the things such as e-commerce is through the roof, online food delivery is through the roof. But like one of the most interesting things for us is purchase of irons has gone through the roof. Because people use in Asia, because labor is so cheap, you would just give your clothes to some roadside laundry shop to like get them ironed. And now they're so scared that alongside mobile phones and desks and like office chairs, irons have exploded. So I mean, the consumer behavior and how people live their lives. But perhaps the most important thing is how the regulators have reacted. And by and large, I feel like regulators talk about a sense of purpose in the way that feels more than just superficial, where they're like, okay, what are we doing to contribute in this current environment? How are we enabling e-commerce players, e-wallet players, micro SMEs, one-woman shops down the road to transact digitally in the current environment? Because everyone is scared where health systems are creaking. I think for us, it's been, largely a glass half full journey, if you like. I mean, through a whole lot of suffering anyway. But it's been really fascinating to watch as to what this kind of huge digital disruption looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. It's definitely something that's unprecedented. Not something that any of us has really experienced before, even in light of the earlier, well, I won't call them pandemics, but with SARS and all that stuff that's hit us before. Nothing on this scale. And I like to touch on a couple of things that both of you brought up, which is one, this whole payments being a very fragmented landscape in Asia Pacific. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there's 70 plus and probably growing a number of different local payment methods. And the other thing that we talked about, or Rajiv, you mentioned, is that these regulators are getting involved more and more in a sense of purpose. So my question to both of you is that do you think this trend of continuous growth, like really explosive growth, sustainable? And do you see any sort of challenges that you foresee in terms of regulatory aspects, compliance aspects, kind of the environment that we operate in, to support or sort of maybe reach a point where the growth becomes difficult? Maybe Rajiv, you wanna start us off this
Yeah,
discussion?
so I think I'd like to believe that this digital adoption is a one-way street. Like once, I certainly can't imagine my mom, for example, ever going back to her normal ways of shopping, having sort of gone through this. I mean, unfortunately, at least in emerging Asia, I'd say that we still have at least 6 months more of these kind of lockdowns and restrictive social behaviors ahead of us. So I think this digital adoption, new business models will continue to go through. I think regulators are responding heroically to this. I think the one huge challenge that I see, which I certainly see in the current environment, is wherever there is this massive adoption, there is a fair bit of fraudsters to step into the game. So notions of cybersecurity, how do we protect people's digital assets? How do we protect, this kind of hacking behavior? I mean, the cloud adoption, digital, even for some of the legacy banks in the region have been, incredible. But I feel like they're switching into so quickly that perhaps the muscle required to make sure that everything is really secure end to end and consumer privacy first. I think those things are the things that I really worry about. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night is how do we, wherever we've seen massive digital adoption, we've seen some kind of fraud, hack attacks, etc. come in, and how do we make sure and work with regulators to keep the bad actors out? I suppose that would be my single biggest worry when I think about the road ahead.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Rajiv.
Yeah.
And Alison, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to Rajiv's point about the regulators, so Bank of Indonesia, which obviously regulates all of the payment in Indonesia, they've actually set up a very comprehensive blueprint for 2025. So I think COVID has, if anything, forced them to accelerate those kind of plans and those conversations that they're having with other ministries and also with the industry. So I see it as a positive thing, and I think I also second Rajiv that a lot of the digital adoption that people has had to make, like our parents, with going back to your example, I think once you experience the convenience of online payments, it will be quite difficult to go back to how you were doing it before. Like for myself, I really maybe have left my house maybe a total of 5 times since March, right? So I'm getting everything from my household, from my kids, everything is on online deliveries through WhatsApp, Instagram sellers, and I kind of enjoyed that, right? So even if I can go out and all that, so there are things that I probably won't change. So I think that's also a positive thing. I think big challenges ahead. Yeah, Rajiv again is right with the fraud. We have seen, a lot more people, I guess, becoming more creative with how they take advantage of existing systems and solutions to find loopholes to try and do things that they're not supposed to. I think that has always been an issue in Indonesia. I think with fraud. I think COVID especially, it kind of heightens the intensity a little bit. It's just that now we as the good guys, right? We need to also work together to share information and figure out exactly what kind of schemes they're doing at the moment, and how do we work together to stamp that out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about how do we work together and keep all these bad actors out of the system as much as we can. And Rajiv, I like the way you said it once earlier. We're compressing 5 years of evolution almost into 9 months, and then basically I think what I do see is that regulators by and large wants to do right by their people, protect them, and all that stuff. With this rapid kind of evolution taking place at a pace that never seen before, do either of you see challenges in terms of complexity of regulations, like rules coming out left, right, center, and navigating these sort of new laws, new regulations, new guidelines, and stuff like that? I mean, not just in Indonesia, but across the region, if you have an experience.
Maybe I can speak for Bank of Indonesia. I think, like I mentioned before, even before the pandemic, they did come up with a 2025 payment system blueprint, as they call it. I think they've been very consistent with those plans. And if anything, the discussions have been really accelerated. The plan is quite comprehensive. It ranges from regulatory changes, how do they want to do the licensing in the future. It also talks about some technology infrastructure that the central bank is planning to provide, for the industry. Also talks about cross-border relationships between Indonesia and our neighboring countries, Thailand, Malaysia. How do you facilitate e-money cross-border transactions? So I think all of those things have been in a very good place before the pandemic started. And now they realize that, hey, to support the industry, we need to sort of fast track some of these things because of COVID.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, I fully agree with Alison. I think, like, if I take a step back and take a macro picture, I think Asia Pac has always had, a couple of quite well-performing role models in different ways. So, you've got a market like China where, digital adoption, financial inclusion has, leaps and bounds ahead really anywhere else in the world. And then you had a market like India, which had the UPI framework, the single payments interface framework that has also allowed massive digital adoption. And I think markets such as Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam had really quite well thought out frameworks for what was the right answer for the market. And I think it was, 90% correct. I think what the pandemic has done is that, like, okay, let's take this thinking and now let's put it into action. Let's really start developing it and allowing, innovative players, but also the established incumbents to come and innovate based on this framework and, these broad guidelines that we've already laid down. I feel like I don't think there was ever a lack of expertise or competence or kind of foresight. I think all of that was there. But the execution imperative that COVID has brought along, because if you don't execute, you're really letting your country down. I think that feeling, and I really feel that that's a shared, it's a shared purpose. It's the regulator, it's it's certainly companies like ourselves, DOKU, who really feel like they are right in the middle of supporting an economy. So I think that it's more the execution imperative that's become a lot more clearer. I don't see mixed messages, if you like, coming out of the government or the regulator with regards to this.
Right. Cool. And we've got about 5 minutes or so left, and I'd just like to touch on the last bit, right? like here in Singapore, we've seen that, when we started going online really quickly, a lot of the stores started to run out of stock. So you see a lot of sourcing as a consumer from overseas as well, cross-border markets, buying from the US, from the UK, anywhere in the world pretty much. And so, there's this phrase I came across, that as e-commerce becomes more global, e-payments may become actually more hyper-local. So there's a lot of preference now for local payment options, and so, yeah, and like, for example, right, in Indonesia, a lot of mobile e-commerce penetration. In Thailand, it's a lot of mobile banking penetration. And you see sort of trends like that, and e-wallets versus bank transfers, and not so much credit cards within the Asia Pacific region. So maybe in that context, do you have any sort of tips or recommendations for our viewers today who might be thinking about scaling up in the region, given now how people are thinking about cross-border a lot more? Just sort of some thoughts around that. Maybe Alison, you want to go first, or Rajiv?
Sure. Yeah. So the local payments is very crucial if you're planning to market your products and your services to Indonesians. I mean, I think that same applies to other Southeast Asian countries as well. I always tell my friends this who are not so familiar with the Indonesian market. When I shop on Amazon, when I check out, I'm basically given one option, which is credit card, right? Sometimes you'll see PayPal in other websites. But when you're shopping at an Indonesian website, you're literally seeing like 20 or even sometimes 30 different logos of different payment channels that you can use. And it's such a big range, right? Going from credit cards to virtual accounts, convenience stores, which would be paying cash. You literally bring your cash to the convenience store to make payments for something that you bought online. There's also, buy now, pay later options. There's e-money like OVO. So it's really a huge range because, it's such a big population and it's so diverse, not just economically, but just in terms of behavior and trust. Different people trust different payment instruments, based on their background, their past experiences, their communities. So it is very, very specific. We've seen some big global brands launching their services in the market. And pretty much all of them, have experimented with this local payment. They're not just relying on credit card. They're exploring carrier billing, local e-money. I think you just have to, and it quite intimidating for someone who doesn't live here, who doesn't really experience and use these payment channels on a regular basis. It definitely takes some time to really study what's the difference between each, who favors what. You'll have like different ticket sizes when people pay using credit card as opposed to convenience store, different conversion rates. So it's a lot of information that obviously needs to be studied. But the good news is that there are a lot of people in Indonesia who are experts at this. I think even PPRO, you guys have done a very good job at understanding all of this local dynamics and intricacies. So that would be my tip. Definitely do not rule out the local payment options. That's really key.
Right, cool. And
Yeah.
Rajiv?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot to add to what Alison has said, but I'm also fascinated by how well the logistic multinational supply chains have really held up in the current environment. After an initial spate of shortages, there's really been none, despite the fact that the supply chains are so global. I mean, I certainly think I subscribe to your view. I've worked for a few American companies, and perhaps for the American audience, there's always this one slide which is about what is our Asia Pacific strategy, and I find that's a bit of a non-starter for me, because there is no such thing as an Asia Pacific. It's really, if you don't have a strategy for Indonesia, for Vietnam, for Thailand, for India, then there is no way you'll succeed, because each one of these markets require so much hyper-localization. And I don't even know hyper-localization is the right word. It just requires a building of ground-up infrastructure, especially when it comes to, if you really want to solve a payments or a financial services problem, there is really no single solution that travels across these markets. So if you're looking to enter Asia Pacific, think countries before you think region, and then, be ready to really start ground up for each one of these markets, because that's really the only way to succeed.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that tip, Rajiv. And I think you could have said it better. Like particularly in Asia Pacific, we're all separate countries. Unfortunately, right now, regulators are doing their best, but we do all have to grapple with different rules, different ways of doing things, and we really need to think about it. So, I really like to thank both of you for taking the time today. It's been a great discussion, and I hope that you had fun as well with joining me today, and I hope to get coffee with you guys soon once this whole
Yes.
thing is over.
All right. Thanks, Kelvin.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thank
much,
you. Thanks,
Kelvin.
Rajiv. Thanks, Alison.
right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.